Welcome to the special meeting of council Tuesday, August 9th, 2022. We acknowledge that the town of Kirkland Lake is located on the traditional territories of the Cree and Algonquin peoples and other indigenous peoples whose presence continue to enrich our vibrant community today. We recognize and offer our gratitude for their care and teachings about the earth and culture. We honor those teachings through our interactions today and every day hereafter. We thank them for sharing this land with us. We commit to ongoing learnings about how cultural identity is celebrated, represented, and honored, as well as the inclusion of the Indigenous perspectives through action. Megawitch, thank you. Meeting called to order. A moment of silence. Approval of the agenda.
Moved by Councillor Eugene Ivanov, seconded by Councillor Rick Owen. Be it resolved that the agenda for the special meeting of council held on Tuesday, August 9th, 2022 be approved as circulated.
All in favor? Motion carried. Is there any declaration of pecuniary interest? None noted.
Jen, excuse me. Hello?
Go ahead, Casey.
Can I check with the clerk? Do I have to declare what that statement you said, or is it just noted?
So we can note it for the minutes that Councillor Owens will be placed in the waiting room as he's unable to secure confidential space to participate in camera.
Thank you.
We may have a motion to move into closed.
We do, your worship. Moved by Councillor Stacy White, seconded by Councillor Lad Shaba. Be it resolved that council adjourn in camera pursuant to section 239(2) of the Municipal Act 2001 as amended at 4:42 p.m. for the following reason. Item 13.1 being labor relations or employee negotiations and personal matters about an identifiable individual, including municipal or local board employees.
All in favor? Motion carried. Okay, we come out to matters for discussion from the closed session.
I'm just going to
Councillor Owen?
Yes, because there is a recommendation coming out of the closed meeting, I have to declare a pecuniary interest again.
Councillor Owen, I have to read the recommendation moving back into open session.
Oh, sorry. I thought we'd done that. My
Oh,
mistake.
We're not there yet.
I'm just too anxious to leave.
So moved by Councillor Owen, seconded by Councillor Shaba. Be it resolved that the council resume in the open session of special meeting at 5:38 p.m.
All in favor? Motion carried.
Okay, now.
Your worship, can ask for declaration.
Do we have any declaration of pecuniary interest? Councillor Owen?
Yes. I, Rick Owen, am declaring a direct, deemed, and/or indirect pecuniary interest on the agenda of the meeting dated Tuesday, August 9th, 2022. Open meeting, agenda item 14.1, agenda title, compensation and pay equity review. It is a deemed pecuniary interest as it may affect my son or my wife. The nature of my interest is as follows. My son Brian is the acting water foreman. And until December 21st, 2021, my wife Charlene was the water billing clerk.
There's no
Duly noted.
Councillor Coleman and the waiting room. Okay. If you wanted to identify the item,
Which one?
514.1.
Compensation and pay equity review. That was Alan. You have further comments? Okay, thank you.
The consultant's going to present.
Jane, you're on.
Yep. Okay, shall I share my screen again?
You have the ability.
Okay. Okay. Again, thank you for the opportunity to discuss this with you. Sometimes these just don't work. Okay. So I'll just quickly go through the presentation in consideration of this issue, and hopefully there we go. Okay. So the compensation review, Gallagher was engaged to conduct the review on behalf of the town to make sure that you have appropriate levels of compensation for your employees, for the non-union and the unionized employee groups. And as I said, I use that word very specifically because we want to make sure that you're not paying more than you have to pay, but you definitely don't want to be paying less than you should be paying or need to be paying in order to meet your internal equity and pay equity compliance obligations. So the word appropriate levels is intentional language that I've used. The scope of the review that we completed included a job evaluation for internal equity, pay equity analysis for your legislative compliance piece, and then we did an external assessment of the marketplace to see how competitive you were relative to a group of comparator organizations. We covered off 5 different employee groups. We had 92 positions in total across these different groups. So we had town non-union group, library non-union group, QP 26, which includes the Parks and Recreation and the Public Works positions. QP 1074 has long-term care positions, and then ONA has registered nurse roles, and our fire positions represented by the IAFF organization. The last comprehensive review for the organization was completed, we'll say a number of years ago. When we do the math, it's 31 years since that last overall review that has been completed. You have maintained your job evaluations through regular committee job evaluation to take new jobs or change jobs. You evaluate them, you put them into your hierarchy. So that's been going on through the period of time since 1991. You have also maintained some of your increases as well going forward by having annual cost of living adjustments to the entire salary grid. So you have been trying to maintain your placement in the marketplace. However, in terms of your pay equity compliance, you achieved it in 1991. However, there is a requirement that you maintain your pay equity compliance, and you have to have documentation and evidence to support that compliance requirement. There is an absence of documentation at this point in time, so there is definitely a vulnerability in terms of that obligation. Meanwhile, on the outside, looking outwards, the municipal labor market is currently very, very robust and very aggressive, high competition going on. We do have this silver tsunami of baby boomers that are retiring in the municipal sector. Prior to this, maybe 3-5 years ago, we would have said that you had some reasonable turnover going on in the municipal sector. I call that healthy turnover, where you are having some people churn. But now we have en masse retirements, and it's across all different kinds of positions, all different fields and functions within the organization. Meanwhile, you also have a diminishing pool, and this is an observation, where you have graduates that are coming out of some of the more traditional municipal sector type of areas of study. We can include in there the planning group, the engineering, civil engineering, municipal finance graduates, even positions like bylaw and building inspection are extremely difficult to recruit, and we have less people going into those fields. And when they do go into those fields, they're not necessarily looking to the public sector for their career opportunities. And then for a number of the positions, particularly a lot of the labor positions, you're competing with the private sector now, who has a little bit more flexibility. They don't tend to have, in a lot of cases, formal structures. So they have a little bit more flexibility to, have other compensation opportunities to attract candidates for their positions. The town's already experienced a number of these challenges in their recruitment activities over the last couple of months, where you are finding that you're just not getting the candidates that you're looking for, and then maybe the candidates that you are interested in or you do get. There's a lot of times there's negotiations that go on in terms of candidates looking for other enhanced compensation that might be beyond your current compensation program. When we approach our compensation reviews, we take these as our 4 pillars in terms of what we like to include in our reviews, and we use these as our standard bearers to make sure that any of our deliverables achieve these 4 areas. So the first one is fairness. Whenever you're talking about pay, people are naturally, they're people. They want to look at what is the person beside them earning, and do they feel that that's fair given what I'm doing, given what they're doing? Is the pay comparable? So we do fairness, or how do we assess fairness? We do it through job evaluation and having an internal structure that ensures that jobs of similar value are being paid a similar value. Compliance speaks to pay equity legislation, and it is strictly the analysis of female job classes as compared to male job classes of the same value or similar value. And if they are of similar value, then the female job class has to be paid at least as much as the male job class. It can be paid more, but it has to be paid at least as much as the male job classes as well. Competitiveness, that speaks to the attraction and retention issues in an organization. You want to make sure that you're in a position to be able to fill the vacancies that you need, to fill the new roles that are coming in with new mandates and new policies and programs that you're implementing. You have to be able to attract those candidates. And once you do get the candidates, you don't want your employees to be attracted to go elsewhere. So you have to make sure that you are at least competitive in that market space. And then the last point is particularly if this was a private sector presentation, we might not have that 4th bullet point, but definitely in any public sector organization, we have to be very mindful of the affordability issue and making sure that we have recommendations that are respectful of the public sector purse that we're impacting. Internal equity is the first pillar, first step of the process. So we have a universal job evaluation plan that we've used for all employee groups. And the consultant, myself, we evaluated all of the positions based on updated job information that was updated through an extensive exercise last fall. The job evaluation points that come out of that analysis are used to help us develop a pay band. So we put all of the job evaluation points for each of the different employee groups, put them in rank order, then we come up with a banding structure that makes sense, giving consideration to things like what's your current pay, what's your current banding structure, what does the market say about some of those positions that we bring into the conversation. And we, what makes sense for the organization. So we take that structure, and that provides the foundation in which we can do our pay equity analysis. So we have to have the bands, we have to have the positions in those bands, and then we have to do the gender analysis as well. The Comparator Marketplace, we have 11 comparator organizations that participated in our our review. We solicited for their salary information, their job information, and organizational charts. The only municipality that did not respond to our solicitation is West Nipissing. However, we were able to extract some of their CUPE information. It is published on the websites. So that was public information that we used to help supplement our market data. We completed all of the job matching. There are some of market surveys that are done where you go out and you look for benchmark jobs. So you take a selection of a few positions and you use the analysis of that to infer your market competitiveness for the entire employee group. We prefer to do a deeper dive and actually gather all of the information. We do the job matching and try and match as many jobs as possible in the organization. It gives us a much more robust and more confidence in the analysis that we come up with. Statistical market data was collected for all of the employee groups that we were tasked to look at. However, in our report, we have no market analysis summary for the CUPE 1074, which is the long-term care group, and the ONA positions. There was just insufficient information from that comparator organizational group. So when we talk about an external market review, we want to know, well, okay, it's great to say we want to be competitive, but how do we really define what competitive is? And so we have some benchmark measures that we use as our guide. So first step is defining what marketplace you want to be in. What is the target place? Do you want to be leading in the municipal sector or in your comparator group? Which would mean that you would pay higher than the majority of those organizations, and we would never recommend that you be a lagging organization because that totally defeats the whole purpose of being market competitive. So we take a look at the market median, which we believe is a reasonable marketplace for you to be in. You have some good competitors in that group of 11 municipal organizations. So being in the middle of that group is a sound and reasonable place to be. So we take the market data and we compare the 50th percentile of that market data to the town positions, and then that tells us whether you are competitive or not. Competitive being if you're in plus or minus 10% of that. If you're beyond plus or minus 10%, then there's an issue with either you're not competitive and it's a high risk position. You might want to take a look at some job evaluation to make sure it is sitting in the right pay band or has the right salary attached to it, because you have a flight risk. Generally, I would say if someone is doing one job in one town and they look at another town and they say, I can do the exact same job for 10% more in salary, it might be attractive for them. It might be enough of a nudge to say, okay, well, maybe I'll give it some consideration. So that's why we use a bit of the buffer of plus or minus 10%. Generally, when we take a look at all of the market data that we did gather, we're comfortable to say that you are generally aligned to the market median on aggregate or on the total look at it. But there are obviously, when we look at the individual jobs, there are some that are over market, some that are under market, and others that are right in that plus or minus 10% level. The one exception is when we did the market survey for the library positions. Your library positions are significantly or noticeably below market. And that was across pretty well all of those positions in the library, save and except one position, which was competitive. In terms of pay equity is achieved when you can actually demonstrate. And that's why we say you need documentation, you need the evidence to say here we are compliant with our pay equity obligations. You take a look at all of your female job classes, all of your male job classes. And as I said, if they are of the same value, if they're in the same pay band, then they need to be paid the same job rate or greater than the male job class within that same pay band. A couple of approaches to doing pay equity analysis. It is prescribed in the legislation. The first one is to do it by job to job. That's the first step. If you have a male comparator within your same pay band, you compare to that job rate. If you don't have a male comparator in your same pay band, then we have to do the proportional value methodology, which is taking an analysis of all of the male job classes. We plot their job rates, we plot their job evaluation points, and it's called the male pay line. Take the female job class that does not have a male comparator and bring it up to that pay line with their job evaluation points, and it tells us what should be the pay equity rate to be compliant. And we have had to use in our analysis both approaches to achieve the compliance. When we developed the proposed salary grids, we tested for this pay equity analysis. And so all of our outcome from that analysis, the proposed job rates, the proposed salary grids are pay equity compliant. The union pay equity analysis is not being presented as part of this report. They are part of collectively bargained union groups. And so we have to be respectful of the union participation in the union role in those pay equity analysis documentation. So we are still reviewing that with those employee groups. The IAFF, it's all males, all male job classes. No female job classes, so there's no obligation to complete any analysis further on that employee group. Taking all of the information from our review, so we did the job evaluation for internal equity, we did the market review to see how you're doing in the marketplace, we put that together, do our pay equity analysis, making sure all of the proposed grids are pay equity compliant, and we came up with what we have presented today as the 2022 salary structure for the town library and for the town, for the library and the town non-union employee groups. So when we take a look at that, as I said, what are your current job rates? What's the pay equity compliance, market competitiveness? There are some design principles that we adhere to as well. We want to make sure we don't have what's called salary compression that we're introducing into your grid, which is really we want to have enough distinction between one pay band and another pay band so that you have some noticeable differences in terms of what you are compensating positions of presumably higher value as you go up the hierarchy. We look at internal equity as well. We want to make sure that across the different employee groups, we've got some relativity there. So we took that into consideration. And then the last point is affordability. We also looked at measures as to how can we effectively implement this in a reasonable fashion and that is mindful of the public sector purse that we are utilizing. So taking all of those into consideration, we did estimate the cost to implement the grids, and we are recommending a retroactive date of January 1, 2022. This was basically the date when we were anticipating having the review completed earlier in this year, in the year, and it is what was conveyed to employees as well in some employee information sessions last fall and early this year. The approach we use to implement or to develop the costing is we take employees in the old grid, we take a look at what is their current job rate or current rate of pay, and we look for a step in the new grid that is closest to but not less than what they're currently making, and then that becomes their new step. Okay. The total cost using that approach and a retroactive date of January 2022 is estimated to be for both non-union employee groups 2.4% or $88,353. We have presented to Council some recommendations to adopt the proposed 2022 salary grids for the town and for the library. They do achieve internal equity. They do meet your pay equity compliance obligations with the analysis that we have completed, and it is externally competitive to the marketplace. A retroactive implementation date of January 1, 2022 has been recommended. And then we've also offered some recommendations on how to maintain your program going forward. Again, hoping that you don't have a 31-year lapse between this review and your next review as well. So One of the policy changes that we are recommending you take into consideration is that when you adjust your salary grids for the non-union group, that you take into consideration a little bit broader scope of criteria. You're looking at the consumer price index, look at other comparator organizations, what are they increasing their salary grids by. You could also tap into things like published surveys that other consulting firms and ourselves often have coming out later in the year towards budget deliberation times. Looking at all of these different factors gives you a better picture as to what rate will make you competitive, as opposed to relying strictly on what a union organization has negotiated over. Usually it's a 3-4 year period in advance. And so you might want to take into consideration some of these other factors to make you a little more maintain your competitiveness on a go forward basis for the non-union group. Evaluate new and changed jobs. So at the conclusion of the project, we will hand off the Gallagher job evaluation plan and give you some instructions on how to maintain it going forward. We are, as I said, recommending that you do periodic reviews of your marketplace every 3 to 5 years, as opposed to 31, and then testing for compliance, ideally on an annual basis. But if you really don't have a lot of change in your organization or that particular employee group, you might be able to do it on a biannual basis every couple of years, just to make sure that you do have your compliance obligations satisfied. And that's it.
Your worship, we have to pause for a moment. I'm just waiting to see what's going on with Councillor Owens's connection. Okay, we're good.
Do we have any further discussion or concerns from council? None noted?
Would you like me to read the recommendation?
Yes, please.
Moved by Councillor Stacy White, seconded by Councillor Eugene Ivanov. Be it resolved that report number 2022 CAO 004 entitled Compensation and Pay Equity Review be received, and that council approve the proposed 2022 adjusted salary grid for implementation retroactive to January 1st, 2022 for non-union and library employees, and that a bylaw establishing a schedule of salaries for non-union employees be brought forward for 3 readings on August 16th, 2022. And that the cost for implementing the proposed 2022 adjusted salary grid be drawn from the working capital reserve, and that council direct the chief administrative officer to adjust the town of Kirkland Lakes pay policy to target pay at or above the 50th percentile median of the market, and that amendments to the town of Kirkland Lakes pay policy be brought forward at a future meeting for council's consideration. And finally, that council direct the chief administrative officer to present the pay equity analyses for each of Canadian Union of Public Employees 26, Canadian Union of Public Employees 1074, and Ontario Nurses Association, following review and agreement with each of the respective bargaining agents.
All in favor? Motion carried.
Okay, I just have to let in Councillor Bowman. Okay, moved by Councillor Lad Chaba, seconded by Councillor Casey Owens. Be it resolved that the following bylaw be read first, second, and third time, numbered, passed, signed by the mayor clerk, and the seal of the corporation be affixed thereto. Bylaw number 2257 being a bylaw to confirm the proceedings of council at a special meeting of August 9th, 2022.
All in favor? Motion carried.
Moved by Councillor Rick Owen, seconded by Councillor Stacy White. Be resolved that this special meeting of council do now adjourn at 6:04 p.m.
All in favor? Motion carried.